Everyone, here, and welcome to wonderfulwoodworking.com. And today what I'd like to do is just spend a little bit of time here pertaining to the beginners. I've been looking around for information for the beginners on how to get into woodworking, how to get started in woodworking. And I have found that there is very little out there for the beginner. And I just want the beginner to know that you're not the only one that is starting out as a beginner, or are you the only one that ever did start out as a beginner? Because you have to realize that you don't just get out of bed in the morning and all of a sudden here you are a pro woodworker. You have to go through all the stages of learning and doing and practicing and doing more and learning more until you get real good at it. So with that said, I think we maybe better talk a little bit about what is woodworking anyway. Well, really when you look at woodworking, woodworking is basically taking a piece of wood, sawing it, turning it, forming it, making it look like something different in perhaps maybe building a box or a birdhouse or a breadboard, whatever, a different project than what the original shape of that board was. Now how do we do that? Well, right off the bat we mentioned sawing. So I guess what that would mean is for basic tools you would want to have a hand saw to get started in woodworking. And that would certainly be a real asset. Now also you have to assemble your pieces of wood. So I guess a hammer and some nails would be in proper call for that. And then, as you know, in woodworking there is always some sanding to be done. Always, always, always sanding. You have to get good at sanding because this is what represents the finished product in the end. So I guess ordinary piece of sandpaper would do the job there too. But the thing is, in today's world, we have gotten a little bit spoiled with power tools opposed to hand tools. And so what I'm going to do is talk about a few of the very basic tools to get started. That'll get you going in woodworking, and you'll be able to do a few projects to get started out. Number one, I guess what you have to do is find yourself a location to do this. And this doesn't have to be some big elaborate shop. It can be a corner in the basement, it can be a corner in your garage, whatever. As long as you've got a little bit of a shelter somewhere to put your tools and a little bit of working room, you're in business. And that's all there's to it. But getting back now to basic tools, I suggest, such as the hammer, the hand saw, of course the tape measure is a critical part. You've got some squares, a little tri-square, this little square here. A framing square is very handy, along with, I suggest, maybe a jack plane or a little block plane, which is very handy for woodworking too, to just kind of keep things nice cleaned up and that type of thing. So this, I just suggest that when it comes to tools, don't go out and buy a whole shop of tools, big elaborate tools that you probably don't know what to do with them to start with anyway. So I would just suggest stay to the very basics and grow as your knowledge and as your business grows. Now I will suggest that you will probably want to have a few power tools, and such as the saw, the table saw. Now I'm not suggesting that you go out and buy yourself a big elaborate table saw. Right off the bat, I started out with a little portable contractor saw here. It's got its own stand, it's got its wheels on, and works very well. This one here happened to be a little Mastercraft that I bought, I think, for about $250. And I might add, the quality of the saw is not near as important as the blade that you have on it. That does have to have quality, such as a good carbide type blade to put on your saw. And you'll find that that will give you a very professional job in most cases, just by doing that. And the second thing that I would suggest, vitally important, would be to invest yourself in a router. A router, you can do a lot of real neat things with a router. shaping all kinds of moldings and putting edges on different things, this type of thing. And that all stems back to the type of bits that you're going to have with it too. Now, the router is no different than that little saw. You have to have quality bits to go into that router too. And I suggest a good carbide type bit to do the job. And you'll find that it will last longer and do the job better for you. And if you can't afford to buy a great big box of bits and that, I suggest just go out and buy maybe 3 or 4 good quality bits and expand as you see fit for that. Now also the router, when you use it by hand, you can do some things with it, but you're very limited to what you can do. I suggest with a router what you should be doing is looking at either buying or making a router table for your router. And you'll find that that will probably increase the use of your router probably by 80% by doing that. Simply because it's easier then to run small pieces of wood through it, making moldings, putting fancy edges on different things, this type of thing. Because with your cutters, there are all different types of profiles that you can put on the edge of things. So you'll want to be giving that a pretty serious thought. Of course, for cutting, the skill saw comes in very handy for cutting large pieces of wood. You'll find that on this little saw, it's hard to cut a 4x8 sheet on there. So with the skill saw and the straight edge, you can get that job done. The little jigsaw is very important when you're starting out, because with this here, you can cut around corners, cut out circles. You can do a lot of fancy little things with this here that you can't normally do with the skill saw or your table saw. You might want to consider that. For the sanding, invest in a little palm sander. These things are not very expensive. This one here is just a cheap little Black & Decker, but I'll tell you, I've used that thing now, I don't know for how many years, and it still works just like the day I got it. But something like about $30, $35 gets you a little palm sander. So that's something you may want to look at. And of course, to put things together, you may want to look at a small air compressor along with a little pin nailer. These really work well. But there again, it's not a total necessity when you first start out, because a nail and hammer and some glue will do the job to you in a slower fashion, but it will get the job done too. Another thing I suggest down the road is invest in a cordless drill. There are so many things you can do with your cordless drill. It's so handy all the time. This one here is an 18 volt. You may not have to go to an 18 volt. Maybe 9 volt is all you need. This type of thing. This here retails, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of about $250, and I think I got it for half price on sale. So if you look around, you will find that type of thing too. And just look around and be patient with that. Another good location for finding generally some pretty good used tools is say in estate sales or maybe at flea markets, this type of thing. Sometimes you'll run into some tools there that are next to new shape for about 1/3 of the price of what you would normally pay. So that may be a good place there to take a look at these types of things too. So anyway, with this said, I think we'll just close off at that, and thank you for watching.